All right. It's 1 o'clock, and I think we're good here. So, hey, folks, Jeff Salzman here. Welcome to the Daily Evolver, and a special welcome to those of you who are joining live via the Integral Life portal and YouTube or Facebook. So today, I wanted to share some quick observations that I have on a cultural meme that has been getting a nice bump over the last couple of weeks. And it's one I have been advocating for a long time. So I want to add my energy to the wave. And the idea I'm talking about is a certain kind of revalorizing of the idea of progress. And it's a new kind of progress, new understanding of it. It's not the old-fashioned progress, which is seen as a, inevitable march forward of my people, but progress seen as the frothy edge of the evolution of humanity and individual cultures and individual people within humanity. And let me start my observations with the guy who got it all going. This particular wave, and that's Bill Maher, who did a segment on his TV show Real Time with Bill Maher, where he skewered the cultural left for what he calls progressophobia, the fear of progress. And here's his definition of progressophobia. And I'll play a little bit. Again, I can't play much because of copyrights and stuff, but I'll play a little bit of it. Here it is. All right, this is Bill's definition of progressophobia.
It's like situational blindness, only what you can't see is that your dorm in 2021 is better than the South before the Civil War.
Okay, so then he goes on to cite a litany of statistics and facts that shore this idea of progress. And he cites, one thing that stuck with me was a multi-decade Gallup survey on cultural attitudes. And one question that was asked over decades is about people's attitude towards interracial marriage. And in 1958, 4% of Americans approved of interracial marriage. 4%. I was alive in 1958. In 2013, 87% approved. And now Gallup has stopped even asking the question. He also pointed out, and this is a really interesting fact, an overwhelming majority of Americans say they want to live in a multiracial neighborhood. And I feel that myself. It's a remarkable development, I think, in race relations that's come online just even in the last 20 years. And that's a feeling of wanting to have cultural diversity in our lives. Evolutionarily, we're ready for it. Monoculture becomes boring at a certain stage, at least for the leading edge 50% of the population. And we want more variety. We want to bump elbows with different kinds of people. That's what becomes interesting. And Bill Maher drives this point home with what I think is a terrific example. And it's about this reunion of the stars of Friends, the iconic TV show that ruled TV land during the early 2000s. And here's what he said.
The Friends reunion we just had looked weird. Because if you even suggested a show today about 6 people, all of whom were straight and white, the network would laugh you out of the room and then cancel you on Twitter.
It's true, isn't it? And that is new. And I feel it. It's correct. And then he, of course, has his disclaimer and he says that despite progress, that, we're still not there yet. There's a long ways to go. And as he put it, he says, unfortunately, racism is still with us. We have the footage. It's with us in housing, jobs, wealth disparity, and equality. And he says, the legacy of injustice demands remedial action. And I thought that was a significant statement coming from Bill Maher, who, I often think Bill Maher is kind of proto-integral in the sense that he can't be quite comfortable with the modernist middle, and he's also not comfortable with the progressive left. And that's sort of a marker of at least beginning to think integrally. And this, what he just said there, that, the legacy of injustice demands remedial action, is a major integration of a progressive idea that I'm not sure Bill Maher has been willing to make in earlier. And that is just this idea of laissez-faire, colorblind approach to race is just not getting us there fast enough. Not when the average net worth of a Black family is 1/10 the net worth of a white family. It's just, that's not good enough 60 years after the civil rights legislation. So there's more that has to be done in a remedial way, in a positive way, in a reparation kind of way. Although I don't think would use that word, and it doesn't, reparations don't have to be financial. They can be cultural, and we're seeing it all over the place, cultural reparations. And then he said another remarkable, I think, integration of a progressive idea. He said, I understand as best I can how racism singes a person's soul so much that they might see racism everywhere. I'll read that again. He says, I understand as best I can how racism singes a person's soul so much that they might see it everywhere. And that's, another insight of progressivism. And that is that you can't understand another person's interior, and you certainly can't speak for them in their interiors. And so then he comes back to his original thesis, which is that seeing clearly, however, is necessary for actually fixing problems, and clearly racism is simply no longer everywhere. And then he goes on to talk about the tremendous progress that gays and gender fluid people have made, and marijuana, criminal justice, and other things in America. And he ends with this line about bullying.
Even something like bullying, it still happens, but being outwardly cruel to people who are different is no longer acceptable. That's progress. And acknowledging progress isn't saying we're done or we don't need more. And being gloomier doesn't make you a better person.
All right. So this editorial that he does at the end of his show, it's generally 10 minutes or so. It got a lot of attention in the mainstream media and in social media. And two responses to it really captured my attention. One is from Peggy Noonan, who did a whole column on it for the Wall Street Journal, very approving. I think the title was Bill Maher Diagnoses Liberal Progressophobia. And here's what she said, some of what she said. She said, it was refreshing to hear a popular entertainer take on progress denialism. It was great. I love how she writes. It was refreshing to hear a popular entertainer take on progress denialism. It was great. And then she goes on, having a sense of perspective about what America is and the progress it has made encourages not only self-respect, but respect for this great project we're all involved in, which is America itself. It's hard to continue an arduous journey towards something like equality when you're demoralized, and you become demoralized when you can see no distance from point to point and are given no credit for pushing on. And I thought that was a pretty good comment on that. On the center left, Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough and his show on MSNBC did a long segment on Bill Maher's piece where they talked about, they had a whole panel of people, and they talked about that this was one of the most forwarded pieces on social media that they had seen in a long time. A lot of people forwarded it to them. And they made the same case about that not acknowledging progress is demoralizing. Reverend Al made that point. And they also made the point in terms of race relations that this problem of progressophobia, they referred to it as latte liberals, which is another way of saying white liberals. And they're making this distinction, and it's an interesting distinction, that even in the Black community, that the majority of people, it's like we're seeing in the New York mayor's race, are people who want more police, and they're not progressive in the latte liberal sense of the word, and that sort of distinction within the Black community continues as culture evolves, continues to be brought into focus. So what we see here is Peggy Noonan on the center right and Joe Scarborough on the center left. They get it. And that's, I think, why this made such an impact, because there's a whole lot of people who still have their hearts in, the center. And the center left is, developmentally speaking, it's orange-green, modern and postmodern. The center right is blue-orange, that is traditional and modern. And those people are ready to hear this message, and it made a big impact on them, and I'm happy about that. And with that said, there's still a big portion of the population that doesn't get it and doesn't want to get it. And these are I guess we would say the fringes, the extremes, but the 20 to 30% on each side, that on each end, that is, the progressive left, the multicultural left, and the conservative God and country right. Those people don't get it and don't want to get it. And the way Green sees it, Green is the stage of development that comes out of modernity. It's the postmodern stage. And it is often referred to as the sensitive self. And this is where people become sensitive to other people's interiors. They also become sensitive to their own interiors. This is the arising of therapies and psychotherapy and so forth. And also seeing injustice, seeing deeper into injustice. More of that is revealed in Green, and you have literally more sensitivity to it, and it's less and less tolerable. And that's, Green continuing to move into the future. And then the other characteristic of Green is that it is a naturally deconstructing self. It wants to deconstruct the great myths of history, the great triumphal myths that say that my tribe or my people or my nation is and should rule over the world. And they divide the world into who's in, who's out, who's the winners, who's the losers, who's the saints, who's the sinners. And Green wants to get rid of all of that. It becomes critical of all that. It's what we call critical theory. It looks at, who's being left out of this triumphalist vision. And, so that's, those two things are sort of create the sensibilities of Green. And it's true, Bill said that being gloomy doesn't make you a better person. But in a way, it does signal a more developed moral sensitivity. And that's true of Green. Green tends to be depressed because they're seeing they're not only seeing what's wrong. I mean, people have always done that, but they're feeling what's wrong. And that's, it becomes more and more imperative to fix that. What Green doesn't see is that they are winning the culture war. I mean, I've talked about it endlessly on the Daily Evolver, and that what I think drives Green crazy is that, yes, they're winning the culture war, and that the institutions of movies, TV, all of that sort of thing are moving into progressive ideas, but they're losing in terms of politics and economics. It's not that they're losing, but it's not moving fast enough. And so this is a tension within Green, and it'll continue as the world turns. And then, so that's Green's sort of progressophobia. From the right, the God and country people, they don't like the idea of progress either. They don't think that the modern world is necessarily better than the traditional world, where we all lived as children of God. The people moved away from their families. The sexual revolution is progress. Divorce, affairs, homosexuality. This is, this breakdown in traditional values is not progress. We live in a fallen world, a sinful world. In the East of Buddhism, it's a world of samsara, of suffering. And the only way out is through the purification of the soul, if you will, or one's karma, into a new purified reality. And if you want progress, there's your progress. There's no progress in this wicked world. So, if you want progress, then accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And that's the kind of progress that they get on that side of the street. So that's the lay of the land in terms of progress, the way people view it. And this new meme that Bill Maher kicked off, it's fun to see that it's caught the imagination of the center left and center right. And I hope that continues, because I think that is part of what will be the new integral sensibility, which is, if we're right, coming online. And that is the stage of development that comes out of postmodernity, that is an integration of the best of the traditional modern and postmodern stages, also earlier stages, but that's another story. But just for the sake of this argument, it's the integration of the best of those three. And it's based on not the idea of triumphal progress, but of growth. Growth. And it's a funny thing about growth. It seems good, and it is, but it's hard. Growing means stepping into the unknown from the known. And that's hard. It is. It provokes anxiety and fear. And there's some problems that people hang up on that keep them from doing it. And I think Integral has a good answer for those. And I just want to mention a couple of them real quick. And one of them is the idea that better or progress doesn't mean good. Better doesn't mean good. And you can't say that a world full of suffering, such as our world, is good. All you can say is it's better than it used to be, a hell of a lot better than it used to be. And, we get hung up on a lot of people, you see it on the left particularly, that the idea of progress somehow means that one is accepting the system the way it is. And even that progress has led us inevitably to this point where we stop, the end of history or something. And it's like the critique of capitalism. Capitalism is a stage on the path. It is, it's the thing that has a couple of great things going for it. One is that it moves support and energy to the most productive segments and sectors of society when it's running properly. Not to people who have pull, not to people who have the king's ear, but the people who are actually doing something. That's an amazing thing. That's new in history. It also, I think it was Adam Smith talked about the hidden hand, which manages infinitely complex systems that would not be able to be managed by any kind of a central planner. There's too many millions of variables. But in capitalism, you only have to know a piece of it, your piece of it. in order to do your part to make this amazing world of material progress that is undeniable in terms of lifespan and material wealth. I could go on and on and on. In fact, there's a book, I was going to bring it. It's called 10 Trends. I'll do a segment on it in a future show, but it's just full of graphs, and you can see it online. Just in terms of, children surviving their first 5 years, lifespans, calories, electricity, everything, and in the material world. Now, the spiritual life that's the downside of capitalism and modernity, is that the world is disenchanted. And so this is where we want to bring the re-enchantment that traditionalists know. They live in a world that is, lit up by the love of the Creator in some fashion. And we want to bring that back. But, where we're at now is just the stage on the path. Another realization I think something we have to sort of make room for, is that moving forward is often done by fighting. We fight our way forward. And I often think of a line from Charles Darwin in one of his journal entries, where he wrote this line. He said, "It is difficult to believe in the dreadful war of organic beings going on in the peaceful woods and smiling fields." The dreadful war of organic beings, the bugs and the birds and the snakes and the mammals, all at war and creating this proliferation of life. It's not how I would have created the world, but it's the way the world works. So, one of the sort of gold standard examples that I use on this show often is the first half of the 20th century, with all of its pogroms and wars and, brutality and mass killings and genocides. It burned out an idea that had driven humanity since day one, and that is that triumphalist thing about my people should rule over all. And it has, at least in the developed world, and that's the leading edge, it has created a great peace that we've had for now 75 years. And it's enabled our current war, because we haven't really stopped fighting, but we're having a culture war instead of a hot war. And it can be fought without bloodshed. I wish there was a no war option, but there apparently isn't. I mean, every first tier meme, every, traditionalism, modernity, post-modernity, they all think that if, everybody accepts Jesus, the world will be finally peaceful. Modernity, if everybody becomes rational and logical, then the world will be peaceful. Post-modernity, if everybody becomes sensitive like I am and multicultural, then we'll all live in peace. And I wish those were possible, but we have to move forward through fighting, and we certainly do. I often think of the culture war. It too, this culture war is a moment in time, and it will, just like World War II, the most horrible thing you can imagine, led to the modern and postmodern world. That's what brought it forward. That this culture war will too bring us into a new world where everybody is more fully seen and accepted, treated more warmly, will be friends with everybody in a way that we have no idea how friendly and loving and sensitive we can be as human beings. We've come a long way, and we've got a long way to go. And, I often think of the Victorian age, and we look back on that as this age of stilted manners and everybody sitting up and, no ankle being shown and that sort of thing. And of course, that's a stage on the path. And that our progeny, generations from now, will look back on us as this era of people who are caught up, not in manners so much, but in ideologies and worldviews. This will be seen as the era of worldviews, where people fought over what they believed in. And, or maybe it'll be the age of sophomoreism, where you really think you got everything figured out, and this is the way it should be. I saw that Matthew McConaughey, who is a American actor who is dipping his toe into the idea of possibly running for the governor of Texas, and he's putting out a bunch of political videos and so forth. And he talked about that America is, we don't have to worry. It's actually a very positive message about progress. And he made the comment that America is going through puberty right now. And I think we're a little further along than that, if you want to relate it to growing up as individuals. But I thought it was a really interesting comment. And it just made me think that, the way we look at the changes going on in the culture and how alarmed we are at them is not unlike a parent saying, what happened to my beautiful child? My good-natured and curious 12-year-old has become a surly, withdrawn 13-year-old. And they have body odor and pimples and hair growing out all over the place. What's going on with my baby? And that we could be seeing, we will, we're basically going through that kind of a thing as a culture. And it's not pretty, but there's no choice. We have to grow. That's built into the cosmos. And this is, what it looks like. And yet we see lots and lots of signs of a new integral consciousness arising, where we want to get beyond ideologies. In fact, I just saw a tweet. I was just on Twitter about an hour ago from one of my favorite tweeters, Chloe Valderay, who is an African-American young woman, and I'm not sure she understands integral or has ever heard of integral, but she has a terrific integral sensibility, and she has a big following on Twitter. And her tweet was simple and had many hundreds of likes. And it's one line, she says, "I am becoming less and less interested in defeating my ideological opponents." I love that. So the one last point I want to make is that, and this is just, basic developmental theory, and that is that as we move from the first tier memes of, meta memes of traditionalism, modernism, postmodernism, that those are characterized by what Claire Graves called deficiency needs. The idea that there's something wrong, that we've driven it into the ditch and we have to do something to get us out. We have to fix things. So it's deficiency needs, sort of fear motivations, versus second tier sensibility being what he calls being needs, or the need to create. And I think of it simply as fear motivation versus love motivation. And that we are still very deeply, and this is, again, I think future generations will look back at us and say, oh, that must have hurt. That we're just driven by fear. I feel it in myself. I see it in everybody. I see it in the culture in general. And there's something fruitful about that moves us through first tier. It is, basically the idea that if we relax, we're going to be hurt or die, or, we're not going to have any more progress, actually. And then moving into motivation from just the idea of creativity and expressing oneself and love. That is the move. That is characteristic of the first of this, and really all of the second tier memes. So, we just have to notice that, and notice when we're being run by fear, when the culture is being run by fear, and, what other way is there to get us to get off the couch and be motivated? So that's some thoughts on progress and progressophobia. I want to thank Bill Maher for kicking that off. And so I'll be continuing with the summer schedule here. I'll be back on in 2 weeks. I'm doing the first and third Wednesdays instead of every Wednesday, just through August. And so I appreciate you tuning in. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode of the Daily Evolver. Appreciate it. Take care.